picture this moment. You're standing at the edge of everything you thought you knew about reality, and something inside you whispers that maybe, just maybe, the universe operates in ways that would completely shatter your current understanding of what's possible. That whisper isn't random, it's recognition. And if you're hearing it right now as these words land in your awareness, then you've just passed through an invisible filter that most people never even notice exists. The fact that you found this video, that your attention settled here instead of scrolling past to the next piece of content, that something drew you to click on a title about trusting quantum mechanics when you could be anywhere else on the internet right now, that's not coincidence. That's quantum entanglement in action. Your consciousness just recognized something it's been searching for, and what I'm about to share with you will fundamentally alter how you perceive the nature of existence itself. Here's what's fascinating. Every single day, you interact with quantum phenomena without realizing it. The device you're watching this on right now operates because of quantum tunneling. The GPS that guides you to your destination works because engineers had to account for quantum effects. Your very ability to see these words depends on quantum processes happening in your eyes at this very moment. Yet somehow, we've been conditioned to think quantum mechanics is this abstract, incomprehensible theory that only applies in sterile laboratories. But what if I told you that quantum mechanics isn't just describing the behavior of tiny particles in some distant realm? What if the principles that govern the quantum world are the same principles that govern your thoughts, your experiences, your relationships, and every single outcome in your life? What if the moment you truly understand and trust these principles, reality becomes as malleable as clay in the hands of an artist? Most people live their entire lives believing they're separate from the universe around them, that they're passive observers watching events unfold, that consciousness is somehow produced by the brain like steam from a boiling pot. But quantum mechanics reveals something so profound, so revolutionary, that it challenges every assumption about who you are and what you're capable of creating. The observer effect in quantum physics demonstrates that the very act of observation changes reality at the most fundamental level. Not just influences it, not just affects it, changes it. Before measurement, particles exist in what physicists call superposition, a state where all possibilities exist simultaneously. The moment conscious observation occurs, this wave of infinite potential collapses into a single, definite outcome. Now pause for a moment and really absorb what that means. Reality isn't fixed. It isn't predetermined. It isn't happening to you. Reality is responding to you, constantly, in real time, based on where you place your attention and how you choose to observe what's unfolding around you. But here's where it gets truly extraordinary. Recent experiments in quantum physics have shown that this observer effect isn't limited to subatomic particles. The principles scale up. They apply to larger systems, to biological processes, to the very fabric of space-time itself, which means the consciousness you're experiencing right now, reading these words, processing these concepts, isn't separate from the quantum field that underlies all existence. You are the quantum field, temporarily organized into the pattern you call yourself. This isn't metaphysical speculation. This is cutting-edge science pointing toward a truth that mystics and sages have been describing for thousands of years. The observer and the observed are one unified phenomenon. Subject and object are artificial distinctions created by a mind that hasn't yet recognized its true nature. You aren't separate from what you're observing. You are the observing itself. Consciousness knowing itself through infinite forms and experiences. When this recognition hits you, not just as an intellectual concept, but as a lived reality, everything changes. Not gradually, not eventually, but immediately. Because suddenly you realize that every experience you've ever had, every outcome you've encountered, every relationship, every opportunity, every challenge, has been the universe responding to the quality of your observation, the frequency of your attention, the coherence of your consciousness. Think about the most profound moments in your life, the times when synchronicities seem to cascade around you like a perfectly orchestrated symphony. The moments when exactly the right person appeared at exactly the right time with exactly the right words. The instances when solutions emerged from nowhere, when opportunities consciousness achieved coherence with the quantum field, when your observation weren't accidents, those weren't lucky breaks. Those were moments when you're materialized out of thin air, when life felt magical and alive with possibility. Those so focused, so became so clear, aligned with the deeper patterns of existence that reality reorganized itself to match your awareness. But most of the time, most people exist in what we might call quantum chaos. Their attention scattered, their observation unfocused, their consciousness fragmented across 1,000 different worries, desires, and distractions. They're broadcasting mixed signals into the quantum field, creating interference patterns that generate confusing, contradictory results in their external experience. This is why so many people feel stuck, why they experience the same patterns repeating endlessly, why their lives seem to unfold in predictable cycles of limitation and struggle. They're unconsciously creating coherent patterns of observation around limitation, scarcity, and separation. The quantum field responds with perfect precision, frequency of attention. Now, you delivering experiences that match their dominant might be thinking, this sounds too simple, too good to be true. If consciousness really shapes reality through quantum processes, why isn't everyone living extraordinary lives? Why do we see so much suffering, so much chaos, so much apparent randomness in the world around us? The answer lies in understanding the difference between conscious and unconscious observation. Most people are observing reality through the lens of their conditioning, their past experiences, their inherited beliefs about what's possible. They're not choosing what to observe. They're unconsciously defaulting to habitual patterns of attention that were programmed into them before they were old enough to question whether those patterns served their highest good. But quantum mechanics reveals that consciousness has a choice in every moment. Not just a choice about how to respond to circumstances, but a choice about which version of reality to collapse into existence through the quality of observation. This isn't about positive thinking or wishful hoping. This is about understanding that your consciousness is a quantum instrument capable of precise, intentional interaction with a field of infinite possibility. When you truly grasp this, when you begin to trust the quantum nature of your own awareness, something beautiful starts to happen. You stop trying to manipulate circumstances from the outside and start creating coherence from the inside. You stop reacting to reality as if it's separate from you and start recognizing that you're constantly participating in its creation through the focus of your attention. This shift doesn't require years of study or complicated techniques. It requires a simple recognition, followed by consistent practice. The recognition is that you are not separate from the universe you practice is learning or observing. The to observe with greater and greater coherence, clarity, and intentionality. Every moment offers you a quantum choice point. You can observe through the filter, you can observe through the lens of past limitations or of present possibility. You can collapse reality into familiar patterns of struggle and separation, or you can collapse it into expressions of abundance, connection, and creative potential. The quantum field doesn't judge which choice you make. It simply responds to whatever you consistently observe with emotional intensity and focused attention. It mirrors back the quality of consciousness you bring to each moment, amplified and externalized in the form of experiences, relationships, and circumstances. This is why quantum physicists often speak about the fundamental role of information in the universe. Reality isn't made of matter and energy as we once thought. It's made of information, of patterns, of possibilities that become actualized through conscious observation. And the most powerful information processing system we know of isn't a computer or artificial intelligence. It's consciousness itself. Your consciousness right now, processing these concepts, considering these possibilities, is already beginning to shift the quantum patterns around you. The very act of understanding changes what you're capable of observing. And what you're capable of observing determines what you're capable of experiencing. But understanding is just the beginning. The transformation happens when you begin to trust what you're learning, when you start to live as if these principles are true, when you begin to observe reality from the recognition that you're not separate from the creative intelligence that orchestrates galaxies and coordinates the dance of subatomic particles. What would change in your life if you truly trusted that your consciousness is quantum? What would you begin in nature? To observe differently if you knew that your attention is a creative force capable of collapsing infinite potential into specific outcomes? What would happen if you stopped treating your thoughts as random mental noise and started recognizing them as quantum instructions being broadcast into the field of possibility? What if every emotion you feel is actually a frequency transmission, organizing that's actively molecular structure of your future experiences? This is where most people stumble. They intellectually understand these concepts. They nod along with the science. They feel excited about the possibilities, but then they go back to observing reality through the same old patterns. They wake up tomorrow and immediately check their problems like items on a to-do list. They scan their environment for evidence that confirms their existing story about what's possible and what isn't. But quantum mechanics operates on a completely different principle. It doesn't care about your history. It doesn't reference your past failures or successes. It responds to what you're observing right now, in this moment, with the full force of your attention and emotional engagement. Here's what happens when you finally trust this process. You stop waiting for external conditions to change before you shift your internal state. You recognize that your internal state is what's creating your external conditions through quantum processes that operate faster than the speed of thought. Think about a time when you were completely absorbed in something you loved. Maybe you were creating art, or solving a complex problem, or having a deep conversation with someone who truly understood you. In those moments, time seemed to disappear. Your sense of separation dissolved. You weren't thinking about yourself as separate from what you were doing. You became the activity itself. That's quantum coherence in action. When subject and object merge into unified experience, when the observer becomes one with what's being observed, the quantum field responds by organizing reality around that state of consciousness. Synchronicities emerge, resources appear, opportunities manifest with seemingly impossible timing. But most people experience these moments as rare exceptions, rather than recognizing them as glimpses of how reality naturally operates when consciousness achieves quantum coherence. They think these experiences are lucky accidents, rather than understanding that they're demonstrations of their true creative capacity. The beautiful thing that happens when you trust quantum mechanics is that these moments stop being accidents and start becoming your normal way of interacting with existence. You begin to recognize that coherence isn't something you achieve occasionally through special practices. It's your natural state, temporarily obscured by the habit of observing through fragmentation and separation. Every morning becomes an opportunity to choose which quantum possibility you're going to collapse into your daily experience, not through visualization or affirmation, but through the quality of attention you bring to the first moments of conscious your phone, before you review awareness, before you check your problems, before you engage with the external world. There's a window where you can consciously choose which version of reality you're going to observe into existence. This isn't about controlling outcomes or manipulating circumstances. It's about recognizing that your consciousness is always collapsing possibilities into experiences, and you can participate in this process consciously rather than unconsciously. You can choose to observe through curiosity rather than anxiety, through appreciation rather than complaint, through possibility rather than limitation. When you make this choice consistently, something remarkable happens. the quantum field begins to reorganize itself around your coherent observation. People respond to you differently, not because you're trying to influence them, but because you're broadcasting a different frequency of consciousness that naturally evokes different responses. Opportunities begin to emerge from unexpected directions because your attention is no longer locked onto problems and limitations. When you stop observing scarcity, you create space for abundance to appear. When you stop observing separation, you open channels for connection and support to flow into your experience. The quantum field is incredibly responsive, but it requires consistency. You can't observe limitation 90% of the time and then spend 10% focusing on possibilities and expect dramatic results. The field responds to your dominant patterns of observation, not your occasional intentions. This is why trust becomes so crucial. Trusting quantum mechanics isn't just about believing in scientific theories. It's about trusting yourself enough to maintain coherent observation, even when external circumstances on. It's about understanding seem to contradict what you're focusing, that the lag time between quantum cause and physical effect is where most people lose faith and return to old patterns. But here's what the quantum field is constantly demonstrating to those who learn to observe with precision. Reality is far more flexible than it appears. What seems solid and unchangeable is actually patterns of possibility that have been collapsed into temporary form through repeated observation. When you change the quality of your observation, you literally begin to collapse different possibilities into form. This happens at every scale, from the microscopic to the cosmic. Your relationships exist in quantum superposition until your observation collapses them into specific dynamics. Your health exists in quantum potential until your attention and expectation collapse it into particular states. Your creative situation, your sense projects, your financial of purpose, all of these exist in the quantum field as patterns waiting to be observed into manifestation. The moment you truly trust this process, you stop being a victim of circumstances and start being a conscious participant in reality creation. You recognize that every challenge is actually an invitation to observe with greater coherence. Every setback is feedback about the quality of your attention. Every synchronicity is confirmation that you're learning to work with quantum principles rather than against them. What becomes beautiful is how effortless this process feels when you stop resisting it. Instead of forcing outcomes through willpower and struggle, you learn to achieve results through quantum alignment. Instead of trying to change reality from the outside, you discover how to transform it from the inside through the precision of conscious observation. Your entire relationship with time begins to shift. You stop experiencing yourself as someone moving through time toward future goals and start recognizing yourself as consciousness collapsing potential into present moment experience. The future isn't something you're moving toward. It's something you're creating through the quality of awareness you bring to each quantum moment of choice. This is when life becomes genuinely magical, not in some fantasy sense, but in the recognition that consciousness and reality are engaged in an elegant dance of mutual creation. You're not separate from the intelligence that coordinates the movement of planets and the flowering of seasons. You are that intelligence, temporarily focused through the unique perspective you call your individual awareness. When this recognition stabilizes, when you begin to live from this understanding, rather than just thinking about it occasionally, the quantum field responds with what can only be described as grace. Solutions appear before problems fully form. Resources flow toward you through channels you never could have planned or predicted. People enter your life with exactly the gifts and opportunities your highest evolution requires. This isn't happening because you've become special or chosen. It's happening because you've finally aligned with how reality actually operates at its most fundamental level. You've stopped fighting against the quantum nature of existence and started cooperating with it. But here's where the journey gets truly fascinating. As you develop greater trust in quantum principles, you begin to notice that your relationship people experience uncertainty, as anxiety with uncertainty completely transforms. Most as a threat to their sense of control and security. But when you understand that uncertainty is actually the quantum field's way of maintaining infinite potential, uncertainty becomes your greatest ally. Think about it from the quantum perspective. If everything were predetermined, if all possibilities were already collapsed into fixed outcomes, there would be no room for consciousness to participate in creation. Uncertainty isn't a bug in the system. It's the feature that allows your awareness to dance with infinite possibility and collapse the experiences that serve your highest evolution. This is why people who truly trust quantum mechanics often seem to have an almost supernatural ability to navigate through chaos and complexity with grace. They're not trying to control outcomes. They're learning to surf the waves of uncertainty, using the quantum field's inherent responsiveness to guide them toward optimal experiences. Every moment of not knowing becomes pregnant with potential, rather than heavy with worry. When you don't know how something will work out, instead of defaulting to fear-based scenarios, you begin to recognize that the field is organizing possibilities behind the scenes. Your job isn't to figure everything out. Your job is to maintain coherent observation, while the quantum intelligence that orchestrates ecosystems and evolves galaxies handles the details. This shift in your relationship with uncertainty creates a cascade of changes in how you approach every aspect of life. Decision-making becomes less about analyzing every possible outcome and more about sensing which choices feel most aligned with the patterns you want to collapse into reality. Planning becomes less about trying to control the future and more about setting quantum intentions that allow the field to coordinate circumstances in ways your limited perspective couldn't imagine. Relationships begin to operate on entirely different principles. Instead of trying to change other people or manage their responses, you start recognizing that every person in your life is part of the quantum field responding to the coherence of your own consciousness. When you shift the quality of your internal observation, the people around you naturally begin to show up differently because you're literally collapsing different versions of them into your shared experience. This doesn't mean you can control other people's choices. It means that your coherent consciousness creates a field of possibility for others to access there that makes it easier, highest potential when they're in your presence. You become a tuning fork for possibility, and those who are ready to resonate with that frequency naturally align with your vision, while those who aren't simply fade from your experience without drama or conflict. Your creative work begins to flow from an entirely different source. Instead of forcing inspiration or grinding through creative blocks, you learn to recognize that creativity is the quantum field expressing itself through your unique perspective. When you trust this process, ideas don't just come to you. They come through you with such precision and timing that it feels like you're taking dictation from some higher intelligence. But perhaps the most profound change happens in your relationship with challenges and obstacles. From the old paradigm, problems were things that happened to you, external forces that disrupted your plans and caused suffering. From the quantum perspective, challenges are information systems designed to help you develop greater coherence and expand your capacity to work with universal principles. Every obstacle becomes a quantum koan, a perfect teaching device that reveals exactly where your observation is still fragmented or incoherent. The intensity of a challenge directly corresponds to the magnitude of expansion that's trying to emerge through your consciousness. The bigger the breakdown, the bigger the potential breakthrough waiting on the other side. This understanding completely transforms how you navigate difficult periods. Instead of resisting or avoiding challenges, you begin to meet them with curious awareness, recognizing that they're actually invitations to evolve into a version of yourself capable of collapsing more elegant solutions from the quantum field. Pain and struggle don't disappear, but they stop feeling like meaningless suffering and start feeling like the birth pains of your own evolution. You develop what we might call quantum resilience, the ability to maintain coherent observation even when external circumstances seem chaotic or challenging. The most beautiful aspect of trusting quantum mechanics is how it reveals the underlying intelligence that's been orchestrating your entire life journey. Looking back, you begin to see how every experience, even the ones that felt random or painful at the time, were actually perfectly designed to develop the specific qualities of consciousness you needed to access your current level of understanding. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was accidental. Every relationship, every success, every failure, every moment of confusion was part of an elegant curriculum designed by the quantum field to help you remember your true nature as consciousness itself, temporarily focused through human experience. This recognition brings a profound sense of trust that extends far beyond intellectual understanding. It's cellular trust, the kind of deep knowing that allows you to navigate uncertainty with confidence, because you understand that the same intelligence that coordinates the dance of electrons around atomic nuclei is coordinating the dance of experiences in your life. When this level of trust stabilizes, you begin to operate from what we might call quantum flow. Decisions feel obvious. Timing feels perfect. Resources appear exactly when needed. People show up with precisely the gifts and opportunities that serve your highest path. Life begins to feel less like a series of random events you're trying to manage and more like a perfectly orchestrated symphony in which you're both the composer and the main instrument. But this isn't about becoming passive or fatalistic. Quantum flow requires active participation from your consciousness. It's about learning to sense the subtle currents of possibility and align your choices with the patterns that want to emerge through you. It's about developing the sensitivity to feel when you're swimming upstream against quantum currents and the wisdom to adjust your direction before exhaustion sets in. The practical applications of this understanding are limitless. In your career, you stop forcing opportunities and start recognizing the ones that emerge naturally from your coherent focus on contributing value. In your health, you stop fighting against symptoms and start observing the deeper patterns of harmony and balance that want to express through your physical form. In your finances, you stop operating from scarcity consciousness and start recognizing abundance as the natural state of a universe that creates billions of stars without strain or effort. Every area of life becomes an opportunity to practice quantum principles. Every moment becomes a chance to choose coherence over fragmentation, possibility over limitation, trust over fear. The more you practice, the more responsive the field becomes, creating feedback loops of increasing synchronicity and flow. This is where quantum mechanics stops being a scientific theory and becomes a lived way of being. You're no longer someone who believes in these principles. You become someone who embodies them so completely that your very presence demonstrates their validity to others who are ready to recognize deeper truths about the nature of reality. The ripple effects extend far beyond your personal experience. As your consciousness achieves greater quantum coherence, you begin to contribute to what we might call the morphic field of human possibility. Your individual transformation makes it easier for others to access similar states of awareness because you're literally anchoring new patterns of consciousness in the collective field. This is perhaps the most profound gift of trusting quantum mechanics. You discover that your personal evolution isn't just about improving your own life. It's about participating in the evolution of consciousness itself, helping to birth new possibilities for human experience that didn't exist before pioneers like you learned to navigate quantum realities with skill and grace. Every person who learns to work consciously with quantum principles becomes a beacon of possibility for others who are ready to question the limitations they've accepted as unchangeable facts. Your coherent consciousness becomes a demonstration that reality is far more malleable than most people imagine, that human potential extends far beyond current collective beliefs about what's possible. What begins to happen when you achieve this level of quantum coherence is that your consciousness starts operating like a tuning fork for reality itself. Every thought becomes more precise, every emotion carries more creative power, every intention generates visible effects in your external world with increasing speed and accuracy. You're no longer hoping that your inner work will eventually translate into outer change. You're witnessing the translation happen in real time. The shift is so profound that people around you begin to notice something different about your presence before you even speak. There's a quality of aliveness, of possibility, of effortless confidence that seems to emanate from you naturally. This isn't something you're trying to project or manufacture. It's the natural byproduct of consciousness that has learned to align with the fundamental creative principles of the universe. But here's where most people encounter their greatest test. When quantum principles start working in your life with undeniable consistency, when synchronicities become so frequent they can no longer be dismissed as coincidence, when your ability to collapse desired outcomes from the field of possibility becomes reliable rather than random, something fascinating happens to your identity. You begin to realize that the version of yourself you've been defending, the story you've been telling about who you are and what you're capable of, was just one possibility among infinite others. The personality you thought was fixed and permanent was actually just a pattern of observation that became habituated through repetition. And if that pattern can change, if you can literally become someone else through conscious choice, then who were you really to begin with? This question isn't philosophical speculation. It's a direct encounter with the quantum nature of identity itself. Just as particles exist in superposition until observed, the self exists in a field of potential until consciousness chooses which aspects to collapse into experience. You're not discovering who you really are. You're choosing who to become moment by moment through the quality of your attention. Most people find this recognition both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it means you're not trapped by your past, your conditioning, or your current circumstances. Terrifying because it means taking complete responsibility for the quality of consciousness you're bringing to each moment, knowing that this quality is literally shaping the reality you'll experience next. The old paradigm offered the comfort of believing you were a victim of circumstances beyond your control. The quantum paradigm reveals that you're a co-creator of those circumstances through patterns of observation you may not have been conscious of until now. There's no one else to blame for your experience, but there's also no limit to what you can transform when you understand the mechanics of how consciousness creates reality. This is where many people turn back. They get a taste of quantum coherence, they experience some remarkable synchronicities, they feel the power of conscious observation, and then they retreat back to familiar patterns because the implications are too vast to integrate all at once. They're not ready to release the comfort of limitation in exchange for the responsibility of unlimited creative potential. But if you're still here, if something in you recognizes the truth of these principles despite how radically they challenge conventional thinking, then you're among those who are ready to take the next step. You're ready to live as if consciousness and reality are one unified field of creative intelligence expressing itself through your unique perspective. When you make this leap, when you begin to embody quantum principles rather than just understanding them intellectually, life becomes an entirely different kind of adventure. You stop managing problems and start creating solutions. You stop reacting to circumstances and start generating the circumstances you prefer. You stop waiting for life to happen to you and start happening to life through the focused power of coherent awareness. The practical effects show up in ways that might surprise you. Your intuition becomes incredibly precise because you're no longer filtering information through layers of doubt and mental noise. You can sense which choices will lead to expansion and which will lead to contraction before you make them. Your body becomes more sensitive to the quantum information constantly flowing through your environment. Decision-making transforms from a mental process of weighing pros and cons into a somatic process of feeling into alignment. You learn to trust the subtle signals your nervous system provides about which directions feel life-enhancing and which feel depleting. Your entire being becomes a sophisticated instrument for navigating quantum possibilities. Relationships begin to operate on frequencies of resonance rather than patterns of need and reaction. You stop trying to get something from others and start recognizing what wants to emerge through your connections. Every interaction becomes an opportunity for mutual elevation rather than an exchange of familiar limitations. The people who remain in your life are those who can match or complement your expanding frequency. Those who can't naturally fade away without drama because there's simply no longer enough resonance to maintain the connection. This isn't rejection or abandonment. It's the natural reorganization that occurs when consciousness evolves beyond the patterns that previously defined its relational field. Your work begins to feel less like labor and more like play, because you're finally engaging your creative capacity at the level it was designed to operate. Ideas flow through you with such clarity and precision that execution feels effortless. Obstacles that would have stopped you before become interesting puzzles that reveal new facets of your problem-solving ability. Money starts behaving differently in your experience. Instead of something scarce that must be hoarded and protected, it becomes a form of energy that flows naturally toward value creation and conscious contribution. You stop operating from financial anxiety and start recognizing abundance as the natural state of a universe that creates countless stars without depleting its resources. Your physical health begins to reflect the coherence of your consciousness. Stress becomes less frequent and less intense because you're no longer fighting against the natural flow of quantum intelligence. Your body starts to feel like an ally in your creative expression rather than an obstacle to overcome or manage. Sleep becomes more restorative because your nervous system isn't constantly processing the electromagnetic static created by internal conflict. Dreams become more vivid and meaningful because your unconscious mind is aligned with your conscious intentions rather than working against them. The most remarkable change happens in your relationship with time itself. You stop experiencing time as a scarce resource that's constantly running out and start recognizing it as the medium through which consciousness creates sequential experiences. When you're aligned with quantum principles, you seem to have more time because you're no longer wasting energy on internal resistance and external force. Tasks that used to take hours compress into minutes when your attention is coherent and focused. Solutions appear quickly because you're no longer generating interference patterns that obscure natural intelligence. Life begins to feel spacious, even when your schedule appears full, because you're operating from flow rather than friction. This isn't about becoming superhuman or transcending your humanity. It's about becoming fully human by accessing the quantum capacities that have always been available, but were hidden beneath layers of conditioning that taught you to doubt your own creative power. You're not developing new abilities. You're removing the obstacles that were preventing your natural abilities from expressing themselves. The universe isn't doing something special for you. You're finally learning to work with the universe instead of against it. You're aligning with the creative principles that have been operating all along, whether you were conscious of them or not. The difference is that now you're participating consciously instead of unconsciously. What emerges from this conscious participation is what we might call quantum artistry. Every choice becomes a brushstroke on the canvas of reality. Every emotion becomes a color in the palette of possibility. Every intention becomes a composition in the symphony of experience you're creating through the focused application of aware attention. You begin to sense the aesthetic dimension of consciousness creation. Some patterns feel beautiful and elegant, others feel discordant and chaotic. You develop preferences not based on social conditioning or inherited beliefs, but on the direct felt sense of what creates harmony in the quantum field and what creates interference. This aesthetic sense becomes a reliable guide for navigating complex decisions. You learn to choose the options that feel most beautiful at the quantum level, recognizing that beauty isn't just a subjective preference, but an indicator of alignment with the deeper patterns that organize reality at every scale. The process becomes its own reward. You're no longer creating from the desire to get somewhere else or become someone different. You're creating from the joy of conscious participation in the universe's continuous self-expression. Every moment becomes an opportunity to discover what wants to emerge through your unique perspective. Your relationship with failure completely transforms. Mistakes stop feeling like evidence of inadequacy and start feeling like feedback from the quantum field about how to refine your creative process. Every error becomes information about how to achieve greater precision in your next attempt. You develop what we might call quantum resilience. Setbacks don't devastate you because you understand they're temporary collapses of possibility that can be shifted through conscious redirection of attention. You stop taking outcomes personally and start recognizing them as neutral information about the current state of your coherence. This doesn't mean you become emotionally detached or indifferent to results. If anything, you become more engaged because you understand that your emotional investment is part of the creative process. But your emotions become clean and focused rather than contaminated by fear, doubt, and attachment to specific forms. You learn to hold your desires lightly with the kind of relaxed intensity that allows quantum possibilities to organize themselves around your intentions without being constrained by your limited imagination about how they should manifest. You become genuinely curious about how the field will deliver what you're requesting, rather than anxious about whether it will. The trust that develops isn't blind faith, but educated confidence based on repeated experience of how quantum principles operate when you align with them rather than resist them. You've seen the evidence in your own life enough times to know that consciousness and reality are engaged in a responsive dance of mutual creation. This evidence-based trust allows you to take bigger risks and make bolder choices, because you know that even if specific outcomes don't match your expectations, the process itself will generate learning and growth that serves your evolution. Every experience becomes valuable, regardless of whether it matches your preferences, because you understand that all experiences are information about how to navigate quantum realities with greater skill. Your presence begins to affect others in ways that go beyond what you say or do. People feel more creative, more hopeful, more connected to their own potential when they're around you, because your coherent consciousness creates a field that makes it easier for others to access their own coherence. This isn't something you're trying to do. It's the natural effect of consciousness that has learned to operate at quantum frequencies. You become a living demonstration that reality is more responsive and malleable than most people believe possible. Your very existence becomes an invitation for others to question their own assumptions about what's achievable. The ripple effects extend in directions you could never track or measure. Every person whose consciousness is elevated by contact with your coherence goes on to create their own ripples of possibility. The quantum field begins to organize itself around patterns of greater harmony and creative potential, because more nodes in the network of consciousness are operating at higher frequencies. This is how individual transformation becomes collective evolution, not through preaching or teaching or trying to convince others, but through embodying quantum principles so completely that your presence naturally activates similar potentials in those who are ready to recognize them. You realize that your personal journey of learning to trust quantum mechanics wasn't just about improving your own life. It was about participating in the evolution of human consciousness itself, helping to anchor new possibilities in the collective field that make it easier for future generations to access their full creative potential. The beautiful thing that happens when you finally trust quantum mechanics isn't just that your life becomes more magical and flowing. It's that you discover your role in the universe's continuous creation of itself through the vehicle of conscious beings who remember their true nature and learn to express it with ever greater skill and artistry. What becomes profoundly clear as you deepen into this quantum trust is that you're not just changing your personal reality. You're participating in something far more significant than individual transformation. You're contributing to what physicists call the morphogenetic field of human possibility itself. Every moment of coherent observation, every choice made from quantum alignment, Every breakthrough in your understanding creates energetic patterns that make similar breakthroughs more accessible to others. Think about how innovations spread throughout human culture. One person makes a discovery, and suddenly that same discovery emerges simultaneously in multiple locations around the world. This isn't coincidence. It's the quantum field responding to new patterns of possibility that have been anchored by pioneering consciousness. You become one of those pioneers every time you choose to observe reality through the lens of infinite potential rather than historical limitation. But here's where the journey takes an unexpected turn. As you become more skilled at working with quantum principles, you begin to notice that the field itself seems to be responding not just to your individual consciousness, but to the collective coherence of all beings who are awakening to these deeper truths. There's a synergistic effect happening, where the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. You start experiencing what can only be described as quantum synchronization with others who are operating from similar frequencies. Conversations happen at deeper levels without effort. Creative collaborations emerge organically. Solutions to complex problems arise through group consciousness in ways that no individual mind could have generated alone. This isn't just networking or finding your tribe. It's the quantum field organizing itself into more sophisticated patterns of collective intelligence. When multiple coherent consciousness systems begin resonating at similar frequencies, they create what we might call quantum coherence cascades. The combined effect amplifies everyone's individual capacity to collapse desired possibilities into reality. You begin to sense that humanity is approaching a threshold where enough individuals have learned to work consciously with quantum principles, that a species-wide shift in consciousness becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Your personal mastery of these principles isn't just about your own evolution. It's about reaching the critical mass necessary for collective quantum coherence. The implications are staggering. Imagine a world where the majority of humans understand that consciousness creates reality through quantum processes, where decisions are made based on what serves the highest good of the whole rather than the limited interests of fragmented parts, where problems are solved through collective coherence rather than competitive struggle. This isn't utopian fantasy. It's the logical next step in human evolution, and it's already beginning to happen through individuals like you who are learning to trust and embody quantum principles in their daily lives. Every person who makes this shift becomes a catalyst for others to recognize their own quantum nature. But the transition period brings unique challenges. As you operate more and more from quantum coherence, you may find yourself increasingly sensitive to environments and interactions that are still operating from older paradigms of separation and scarcity. The electromagnetic chaos generated by unconscious fear and fragmentation becomes almost physically uncomfortable. This sensitivity isn't a problem to be solved. It's information helping you navigate toward experiences and relationships that support your continued evolution. Your nervous system is becoming a more sophisticated instrument for detecting quantum coherence and incoherence in your environment. You learn to trust these subtle signals even when they don't make logical sense. Your body knows before your mind does whether a particular choice, relationship, or opportunity is aligned with your quantum path. This somatic intelligence becomes one of your most reliable guides for navigating complex decisions. The speed at which synchronicities manifest also accelerates dramatically. What used to take weeks or months to unfold now happens in days or hours. The lag time between quantum cause and physical effect continues to compress as your consciousness becomes more precise, and your trust in the process becomes unshakable. This acceleration can be disorienting at first. Your mind is accustomed to having time to analyze and prepare between intention and manifestation, but quantum consciousness operates at the speed of recognition, not analysis. You learn to surf these accelerated currents rather than trying to control them through mental processing. Your relationship with planning and goal setting undergoes complete transformation. Traditional planning assumes a linear progression from current state to desired outcome through predetermined steps. Quantum planning recognizes that the field is continuously reorganizing possibilities based on the coherence of your observation, making rigid plans obsolete almost immediately. Instead of detailed strategies, you learn to work with quantum intentions. These are more like energetic templates that provide direction without constraining how that direction gets expressed. You set intentions for the quality of experience you want to create, rather than the specific forms those experiences should take. The field responds to these quantum intentions with astonishing creativity, delivering outcomes that exceed what your limited perspective could have imagined while still fulfilling the essential qualities you requested. You learn to collaborate with the universe's intelligence, rather than trying to micromanage its delivery methods. This collaborative relationship extends to every aspect of your creative work. Whether you're writing, building a business, developing relationships, or solving problems, you learn to recognize when you're forcing outcomes through personal will, versus when you're allowing solutions to emerge through quantum intelligence. The difference in results is remarkable. Forced solutions often create new problems that require more forcing to resolve. Quantum solutions tend to be elegant and sustainable because they emerge from the field's inherent tendency toward harmony and efficiency. You develop what we might call quantum discernment, the ability to sense whether you're swimming with the current of possibility or against it. When you're aligned with quantum flow, efforts feel effortless. When you're working against quantum currents, even simple tasks feel unnecessarily difficult. This discernment becomes invaluable for timing decisions. You learn to sense when the field is ripe for a particular action and when more gestation time is needed. Premature action creates resistance. Delayed action misses windows of opportunity. Quantum timing feels obvious once you learn to recognize its subtle signals. Your creativity begins to operate from an entirely different source. Instead of generating ideas through mental effort, you learn to become receptive to the ideas that are already present in the quantum field, waiting for a coherent consciousness to recognize and express them. You become a translator of possibility rather than a creator of something from nothing. The quality of what emerges through this receptive creativity is distinctly different from what you could produce through personal effort alone. There's an elegance, a precision, a multi-dimensional intelligence that clearly originates from beyond individual consciousness, while still expressing through your unique perspective and skills. People begin to notice this difference in your work. There's something indefinable but unmistakable about creative expression that emerges from quantum coherence. It carries frequencies of possibility that activate similar potentials in those who encounter it, creating ripple effects that extend far beyond the original creation. Your communications become more precise and impactful. Words carry more weight because they're emerging from coherence rather than confusion. People feel heard and understood in your presence because you're listening from the quantum field rather than from personal agenda or reaction. Conflicts become rare and brief when they do occur. Most misunderstandings dissolve quickly because you're not defending positions or identities, but remaining curious about what wants to emerge through the interaction. You learn to sense the deeper harmonies that exist disagreements. Your beneath surface, physical health continues to reflect the increasing coherence of your consciousness. Symptoms that might have persisted for months in the past resolve quickly because your system is no longer generating the electromagnetic chaos that interferes with natural healing processes. You notice that your body requires less recovery time from physical exertion and less sleep to feel refreshed. Coherent consciousness is incredibly energy efficient. When you're not fighting against quantum flow, you're not depleting your resources through internal resistance. The aging process itself seems to slow down. This isn't about trying to avoid natural cycles, but about allowing your physical form to express the vitality and aliveness that emerges when consciousness operates in harmony with universal principles rather than in opposition to them. Your emotional landscape becomes more spacious and flexible. Emotions continue to arise, but they move through your system more fluidly instead of getting stuck in repetitive loops. You experience the full spectrum of human feeling without being overwhelmed or defined by any particular emotional state. This emotional fluidity allows you to respond to situations from choice rather than compulsion. You feel anger when appropriate, sadness when natural, joy when it emerges. But none of these emotions hijack your consciousness or compromise your ability to observe coherently. The quality of your relationships reflects this emotional maturity. People feel safe to be authentic around you because you're not trying to manage or control their emotional expressions. Your presence becomes a field where others can explore their own depths without judgment or interference. Intimate relationships take on new dimensions when both people understand quantum principles. Instead of trying to get needs met through each other, partners learn to generate fulfillment through their individual quantum coherence and then share that fulfillment as a gift rather than an obligation. The relationship becomes a laboratory for exploring how consciousness creates shared reality through mutual observation. Conflicts become opportunities to discover where coherence breaks down and how to restore it. Growth happens through resonance rather than friction. Your relationship with money and resources undergoes profound transformation. Scarcity consciousness dissolves as you repeatedly witness how the quantum field provides exactly what's needed when it's needed. You stop hoarding resources out of fear and start allowing them to flow through you in service of your highest expression. This shift from scarcity to abundance consciousness creates a paradoxical effect. The less you grasp at financial security, the more secure you actually become, because your security is based on trust in quantum principles rather than accumulation of external assets. Money begins to behave like energy rather than a scarce commodity. It flows toward value creation and conscious contribution with increasing ease. You discover that the universe is incredibly generous with those who learn to align their personal desires with the greater good. Your work life transforms from career management to purpose expression. Instead of climbing ladders or building resumes, you focus on developing the unique gifts that want to emerge through your consciousness and finding ways to offer those gifts in service to the whole. The distinction between work and play begins to dissolve. When you're expressing your authentic gifts in service to something larger than personal gain, effort feels effortless and time becomes irrelevant. You're no longer trading hours for dollars, but creating value through the quality of presence you bring to whatever you're doing. So here we are, at the end of this transmission, but really at the beginning of something far more extraordinary than words could ever capture. You've just spent this time allowing these concepts to reorganize the neural pathways in your brain, shift the electromagnetic patterns in your heart, and activate dormant potentials in your consciousness that have been waiting for this exact moment of recognition. The beautiful thing that happens when you finally trust quantum mechanics isn't a future possibility you're working toward. It's a present moment reality you're already beginning to experience. Right now, as these words land in your awareness, the quantum field around you is responding to the new patterns of understanding you've integrated. Your next breath is different because of what you now know. Your next choice carries more creative power because of how you now see. But understanding is just the doorway. The real magic happens when you step through it and begin living from these principles rather than just thinking about them. When you wake up tomorrow morning, you have a choice. You can return to observing reality through the old lens of separation and limitation, or you can begin practicing quantum observation with the kind of consistent dedication that transforms understanding into embodiment. The universe isn't waiting for you to become worthy of these capacities. It's waiting for you to remember that you already are. Every particle in your body, Every wave of electromagnetic energy flowing through your nervous system, every thought arising in your consciousness is already operating according to quantum principles. You're not learning to become quantum, you're learning to recognize what you've always been. Your journey of trusting quantum mechanics begins with the next moment of conscious observation. Not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect, but right now. The field is listening. Your consciousness is the instrument. Reality is the canvas. What will you choose to observe into existence?